WP-Get Web Dev Tutorials for all user levels. Okay guys, so I just wanted to revisit this loading JavaScript dynamically from within a HTML widget in Elementor. And I want to show another example of it as to what it opens up for you. So the video I did previously, and I'll link to this in this video as well, is this how to load JavaScript dynamically. It's also got a link to a GitHub with some more information on where to get this as well. I've uploaded the files to a CDN, so you can easily include those. So to make this work effectively, you need to basically include this file here. So the JS loader min JS, it's only a 2K file from either a code snippet, your functions.php, whatever plugin you use to load JavaScripts. So the prerequisite for this to work is that this has to be loaded before we can use it in Elementor. So that's the only thing we need to make sure is loaded. Okay, so what I'm going to look at today is using a library called SplittingJS, where I've got a standard H2 header here. And if I just press the F5 key, you can see it's split it into its individual characters, and it's animating them by rotating them slightly with a slight offset. I'm using randomization on this, so each time I press the F5 key, it's different. This is a very basic example. I would probably use GSAP or something else to animate this when it comes into view. In this case, I'm just going to show you with some very simple code, simple JavaScript. So once again, I press F5 and I get an animation of split characters. So if we actually have a look at what has happened to this H2, so I'm going to bring up my Chrome DevTools here. So our H2 is here. And it's a standard H2 running some JavaScript. It's split all of these into words, and it's given a class of word. It's given an index, which is automatically done. It's then given a character. So each character split into its own individual character, given a character index. And then the next word, we've got a white space, we've got another word is another character, another character. All I've done this is a standard H2 element. So this is actually a standard H2 heading, and there's some JavaScript which is run that's done this. So showing you the actual JavaScript. So if we go to this page here, so just to highlight this is a standard Elementor heading with, where are we? Just the standard word in here. I can make this new demonstration of splitting. I've just changed the word. That's a standard text. Sorry, it's standard heading widget. Could be anything you like, but I'm just using a heading widget at the moment. All right, and the only other thing we got to do is give this an ID so we can target it with our JavaScript. I've just given an ID of split this. So split hyphen this. All right. So the JavaScript. So if you looked at my previous video, this will all be familiar. So basically the library that was loaded here gives us the access to this global here, the window WPG JS loader. So you've got to have that, and then we get on the window object, we get this WPG JS loader. Okay, and out of that, I've actually added a function to this since my previous video, which is the load CSS. I was just loading JS dynamically. When I started playing with splitting, I realized we needed to load some CSS dynamically as well. So we're going to load, so we're going to pull these functions out here. So these four functions, so load JS, load CSS, check dependency, and debug, they're actually functions. Pulling those out, and globals is an object. Okay, I'm setting debug to true so that we can echo out to the console what's actually happening with the loading, and setting my check time out to 2 seconds. Defaults to 1600. You don't need to do this. I think 1.6 seconds is long enough to wait for JavaScript before you say there's something wrong. But I've just put that here so just to show you can extend that if you want to. So all we're doing is the new method I've added, which is the load CSS, give it a name, and what's the URL to that.
and same with this other CSS. There's two CSS packages I've got to load for this particular library. Load JS. The window object that it's going to create is splitting. So further down here, we're going to use in our JavaScript. Where are we? We're going to use the splitting function. So we're going to check to see if that's on the window object yet. Once it is, it's going to fire success splitting, say that, yep, we've found this on the window object. So it's loaded. After 2 seconds, if it hasn't loaded, it's going to fail. I haven't actually got a listener for that here, but you can actually do something with that, maybe a pop-up or a error logged out to the console, whatever you want. So we know splitting is loaded. We're going to call this, dispatch this method, dispatch this event, and we're going to listen for that event. So once that is loaded, we're going to get a reference, a DOM reference to split this. So that's the H2 widget there. Okay, and then we're going to call splitting on the target being split this, and then the H2 inside that. So if I look at that there, and have a look at my widget. So my widget is there. There's my widget. And inside that widget, we've got a widget container and then the H2. So if we target the widget, which is the, where are we, split this? I'm looking for it. I've got my zoomed in so much here, it's hard to find things. So I'll go up here, it's there. I'm looking for my ID of split, there we go. ID is split this. So we're looking for the ID of splits this, and then the H2 inside that. So that is what we're looking for. The ID of split this, and then the H2. All right. So just by doing this bit here, that is what splits these characters in the H2 into individual words, individual characters, gives them this character index, word index. So SplittingJS does all this work for you. What we then need to do is work out what are we going to do with all these characters. So what I've done is I've just gone through and got a collection of all of the characters. So I'm looking for the splitting, the split element. So the split this, looking for all the .chars. So all of these classes, so all these characters, we're looking for all those. And then we want to iterate through each of those. We want to set the padding style to this constant here. So I'm just saying a padding of 3 pixels around each one. You can't set the properties of, like rotation. You can't just do style dash rotation. I tried it with the, this type of thing here, and it just did not work in Chrome. So you can't do that, which documentation says otherwise, but I've found it doesn't actually work. But if you do a style set property rotation, that works. So all I'm doing is saying I want to go from the rotation range of minus rotation, so from minus 30 through to a random times, that's actually wrong. I should put rotation range there, offset range. Okay, so it's got a bit of residual stuff from playing. So the rotation, we're going to set to rotation range, negative rotation range, plus the math.random rotation range times 2. So that if it's a rotation range of 30, it's going to be either from minus 30 through to plus 30 is what we're looking for. Okay, and same thing for the offset. Just looking at the offset range. So we can change this. We want it more or less rotated or more or less offset. We can just change these constants here. So let's actually go for this. Let's actually make that, say, 90, rotation range of 90, and see the difference this is going to make here. We're going to get a lot more rotation. It's more rotated. Do it again. Okay, so let's make it 180. So a lot more rotation, same amount of offset. There we go. Let's say we want more offset. So let's say our offset range is 200. Let's go extreme. There we go. Too much. Maybe you like that. Anyway, so that's pretty much what I'm doing there. Just playing with these variables. They're setting a CSS variable. So if we look at each of these, so what I'm doing with my JavaScript is the character index is automatically added by SplittingJS. I'm adding the padding, a variable of rotation, and a variable of offset. So that's what this script here is doing, is adding my padding, variable of rotation, variable of offset, which I'm using some randoms for. All right, now once all this is displayed, I want to add the show class to the actual element, so to the widget. And the reason I've done that is down here, I've actually said when it's not shown, I want the opacity to be 0. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to see the text from the H2 as normal text, then it's going to disappear, and then you're going to see it animate in. So I want the opacity to be 0. And then when I add the show, I want the opacity of that entire widget to be 1. All right, so that's just hiding it until this JavaScript is actually run. Now, you might notice here, I went through this in my last video, I've got this body not Elementor editor active. The reason I put that there is because if I don't put that there, I'm going to show you what happens. If I take this class, that rule off there, my heading is gone. It's hidden. I can't see it because I'm in the editor and the JavaScript's not running here to show it. So by saying if I'm in the editor, basically, don't set the opacity to 0. If I'm not in the editor, then set the opacity to 0. So I can just see what's going on here. So that's pretty much what that's all about. Okay, so when we add the show class, we want that to be added. So what's going to happen here is all of this function's going to be will have run. This loop would have run. So we've already split all our characters. We're ready to go. Now we can hit the show and add the show class to the widget. Okay, so that's the first bit. Now, what we want to do is we want to set the actual character opacity to 0. So we want, as soon as this is shown, we don't want all the characters to show. So if you look in here, when I press the F5 key, it's kind of a run. So it starts from the beginning and then it goes to the end. I might actually slow that down so you can see what I mean. So if I put character delay of, say, 200 milliseconds, so it's the animation delay between each character, you can see more of what I'm talking about. So it takes longer to come in, so I can't see any of these other characters here until the delay has come through and it's actually started animating the character. Okay, so that's a bit long for this, but just to demonstrate the purpose of it. All right, now, so that's all of the JavaScript. That's actually what is, where are we? So this bit here is what's actually splitting the characters, adding all the properties that we need to this. So the random offset, the random rotation, the padding, that's all there is to it. Just that JavaScript there, and it's pretty cool. The rest of it is just CSS. So we're putting a character delay on there, which is a delay between each one of these starting. And then we've got a animation delay. So that's how long is this going to animate for. So let's say we want that to be 2 seconds. They get really extreme. F5 here. Okay, I'm going to really slow coming in. If I made that 0.3 seconds, or 300 milliseconds, however you want to write that, and then do an F5, it will come in very quickly. Okay, so you can actually type that, that's kind of like typing in a sense. So looking at this, if you actually tie those together, let's say we make that character delay only 100, right? And then we make this here say 200.2 seconds. See what that looks like. There you go. There's a different effect again. Okay, so by varying these CSS variables, we can change the behavior of that animation. So what we're doing here is that when the split this, so that's this H2 over here, has got the show class, we want to animate the character. So every one of these individual characters we want to animate. And we want to go from a duration of the character animation duration, so what we set up here. Fill mode defaults because we want it to finish on the last frame. The animation delay, we're calculating the character delay, so how long have we set up here? So in this case, 100 milliseconds times the character index. Now this character index is automatically added by SplittingJS. So the first character is index 0, index 1, index 2, all the way through. So all we're doing is taking what SplittingJS have given us as a character index, multiply that by the delay we want. So the first character will have no delay, the second one will be 100 milliseconds, third one 200, etc. So that's how we get that movement along the line there. So it starts from the first and then goes through to the last. Okay. So that's all we're doing, and then our keyframes for that is we start the opacity at 0, we end on 1, start the transform from translate x of the variable offset, translate y from the variable offset, rotate with the variable rotation. So every one of these is going to have its own individual rotation and offset because we've set these random ones on each one. So that's pretty much that. Now, let's say we only wanted to do the Y. So we can take the X off here. What are we doing? That's the wrong one. So translate Y. So we translate Y from the offset through to 0. All right, now I won't see any X shift on here now, just on Y. So I'm just going to F5 now. There you go. So it's just dropping in. Let's just change that to being X. There you go. Again. So you can get all sorts of really cool effects just by playing with the CSS. In coming back to what this tutorial is all about, is we didn't have to load plugins, we didn't have to load libraries, we didn't have to add a whole bunch of snippets to add these. All we needed was this one loader, and then in the page, we're telling it to load the CSS that we need for this, telling it to load the JavaScript we need for this, wait for the dependencies to load, and then run our function down here. And in this case, we've used SplittingJS. I'll put this code in my tutorial as a copy and paste, and I'll put a link through to the SplittingJS as well. So this is a library. It's really, really cool. You can do so much with it if you wanted to play with that. Only one example of what we can do here, but what this changes for me is the fact that because I'm only putting this into the HTML widget, I can put this wherever I want. I don't have to worry about other plugins, or do I put custom code into Elementor, do I use code snippets, do I use whatever. I can load it directly from this HTML widget, and because of the way I've built this, it's only going to load once. So if I have another widget and on this page, if I had another HTML widget somewhere else and I told it to load splitting, it's going to come back with it's already loaded, so it's not going to add this a second time. When I check the dependencies again, it's already loaded, so straight away it's going to call this function here. So we're not doubling up on loading CSS and JavaScript just because we tell it to load in here. I'd probably organize this a little bit better. If I'm going to do this in multiple places, I'll probably have an HTML widget which has pretty much that bit in it. And then I would throw a event when I've loaded my dependencies. And then on other HTML widgets with JavaScript, or maybe a separate widget which is still all of your JavaScript for that page, I would then have a listener and run all of my methods in there. So it's just to me, it's a tidy way of doing it. So yeah, let me know what you think. I think it's pretty cool. This is just one more example of what you can do with JavaScript and CSS from within an HTML widget. So I hope that is something that you can use, and I'd love to see what you do with it, and some feedback as to what can be improved, and let me know if there's anything else you think I should be considering. Thank you.